Thank you all for showing up on the morning of the last day. Aww. I have some content notes for this presentation. I will be discussing a number of upsetting topics in theory because I am drawing an analogy to emergency response situations in the physical world. There will be no details though and no actual scenarios. I won't be going into any of this until slide 8. So if you do need to step out of the room, you have time to do so. Please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. I will not be offended if you have to leave. What would you do if you, hypothetically, woke up, checked Slack while you were still in bed? I know you wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that either. And you saw this. For anyone who may not be able to read this, it is a Slack message from our AWS TAM at the time, which says, can you please look into this case number, blah, your account, AWS account number, blah, is compromised. And since you don't have your AWS account IDs memorized, and if you do, please don't tell me, your mostly asleep brain assumes it's the big account. This is what my brain did. Gonna need some coffee. But seriously, if this happened at your company, do you know what you would do? Is there someone you could call? Do you know how you would reach them? Do you know the answer to that right now, or would you have to go look it up? My name is Courtney. I'm going to talk about how to have an operational incident. What is the minimum viable incident response that you could possibly have? This is the very quick version. There are many things that I do not have time to cover, but hopefully I will hit the high points and help you get started. This talk is about emergencies. The most common definition of an emergency is a situation that poses immediate risk to health, life, property, or the environment. Depending on your business, any of those could apply to you, but property or business reputation is probably the most common for a lot of people in this room. Nobody's gonna die? We've all heard this, right? It's just computers, nobody's gonna die. This is something that a lot of coworkers and conference friends have said to me. But do you know that? Let's say for the sake of argument that you actually do know who all of your customers are. You don't, but we'll pretend that you know who all of your customers are. Do you know who all of their customers are? Do you know every workload that is being run on the systems that you maintain? Do you know all of the ways that they're being used are only the ways that you expected? No, you don't know that. People are always using systems in ways that you didn't expect them to be used. This is a great feature and a great annoyance of people. There is no way to know the fourth or fifth order effects of an outage on your system. So saying that no one will die as a result of your outage is making an assumption which might be unwarranted. I don't say this because I want you to freeze, but because I want you and everyone you work with to take incidents seriously. It doesn't make things better to have a loose and poorly specified incident response protocol, even for very small incidents that are easily corrected or that few customers notice. And if you work on electronic medical records, you definitely can't say this. You may have seen some coverage recently, people talking about how, electronic medical record systems, we can just take it down for a few hours in the night. Doesn't bother anybody. Well, it bothers emergency rooms, it turns out. People do die when this happens. Possibly you've heard productivity people talk about urgent versus important. Urgent is about timeline. If something is urgent, it must be handled quickly. An example of something that is urgent is that your coworkers want to order lunch. They want to know if you want to be in on the lunch order. If you don't answer them in 10 minutes, they time out and order lunch anyway because they're hungry. Important is about needs or consequences, making sure that you have your medication refilled, that you know where your children or pets are and that they're safe. Important can be about danger. An emergency, therefore, is both urgent, time-sensitive, and important. It is about danger or consequences. A fire would be about both danger and consequences. A broken bone from a bad fall would be about consequences. But how do we know something is an emergency? Someone has to know about it. Someone has to assess the urgency and the importance and decide that it is. If an emergency happens in the forest and nobody notices, it was not an emergency because we did not figure out that it was. In the physical world, maybe you see something happen or come across someone who's in distress. In our industry, hopefully you got paged. Hopefully it was by a monitoring service and not by your support team because your customers discovered it first. Maybe you, and then when that happens, you have to decide how to respond. In the physical world, you might get notified about an emergency. Generally, people use 911, right, to call a dispatcher and ask for help. And when that happens, the people who are first engaged on the scene have the same decisions that you have to make when you are paged. What do I do next? And if I need more help, how do I get it? How many times have you said or have you heard about an emergency or incident response, either at work or at home, I didn't have time to think? Thinking takes time. And also, if you don't know what the options are for what can we do next, you'll freeze or panic. So an incident response system needs to eliminate the need to think for as many people involved in the emergency as possible. That's why calling 911 connects you to a dispatcher who can reach all the common response teams directly. So you don't have to take a moment and figure out which kind of response you might need and figure out how to reach them. This is a picture of the sign on the back of my hotel room door in Toronto, where I first gave this talk. Hotels across North America, and probably in other places too, but I keep forgetting to take pictures because I'm always jet lagged, have signs like this in every room, just in case you should need to call for help or evacuate the building. Because if you are visiting here from another country, you don't necessarily know what our emergency number is. Both the US and Canada use 911 as an emergency number. 911 creates a framework for response. It represents years of planning and communication, including these signs. The dispatcher, when you call, knows who they can call, how to reach them, how to get information from you about the situation that you're reporting, and to remind you to keep yourself safe, which is critical. This framework enables you to respond when you encounter an emergency, right? You've been prepared. You have been told what is the first thing that we do when something's really bad. You call 911. If something happens, an emergency, and you don't know what the options for help are, then you don't know what to do, and we're back at that I didn't have time to think. Calling 911 also triggers the response framework used by the dispatcher and emergency response specialists. That's fire personnel, EMTs, police. They have plans for how to reach the emergency, that's called assembling, how to stay in contact with the dispatcher while they do, how to assess the emergency when they arrive, how bad is it, what do we need to do we need more help, how to communicate within their group and across groups. At a fire personnel have to coordinate with medical personnel. They also know how to escalate. How do I get more fire trucks? How do I get more ambulances? The details of how this works vary by country. Canada's is called an Emergency Management Framework for Canada. The US uses the National Incident Management System, which there was a talk on earlier in this conference. So what have we learned? There's a lot of text here. You don't have to read it all. We're going to revisit each of these parts as I go on through the talk. Frameworks are about organization and planning. If you discover something that might be an emergency and your mind goes blank, that means that you have not been enabled to respond. You don't know what you need to know in order to react appropriately. One thing that many of us, and it's interesting that my talk is coming right after Anise before me. I don't think I said your name right. I'm sorry about that. One thing that many of us might have experience with is responding to a friend confessing thoughts of suicide. A lot of people, when this happens to them, freeze because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about what a good response is. Something that most people stumble out is like, I would miss you if you were gone. That's not a terrible response, but there are better responses that we can have if we are prepared. Another thing that we probably have experience with in our professional lives is responding to a security issue. You get a ticket or like a text message or some kind of urgent complaint about like, oh my God, we have a vulnerability, we got to do the thing. But often that doesn't mean that you know how to respond to what you have just been told. Okay, so let's apply this now that we've talked over all of that stuff. We can talk about creating an incident response system for your organization. The best way to do this is to take a national system and adapt it to your needs and tools. The rest of my talk will give you guidance for this to try to help make sure that you don't miss any of the high points. You need to have a way to know that there is something wrong. So you need monitoring and alerting that you have some confidence in. Confidence in monitoring, I think, is probably never better than 60% in my opinion, right? But you need something that at least, hopefully, will tell you at least some of the time that there's probably something wrong, right? In a commercial context, you need to decide what constitutes an emergency. That will usually mean that either people can't use what they're paying you for, or they can't pay you in order to start using it. Examples would be not being able to buy things on Amazon. They take that really seriously. Not being able to launch a new app on Heroku, probably the same thing for Google Cloud or Azure. Like 911, if you make people decide who to engage or look up how to engage them, you will waste precious time. Make sure that you have a single point of contact, that it is easy to use or remember, and publicize it widely. Some companies use ChatOps commands in Slack. That's been pretty effective in my experience. Some companies have a hotline that they expect everybody to put into their cell phone. That is a little less effective in my experience because you have to have put the hotline in your cell phone yourself. The people that this point of contact reaches, whatever it is, should be able to fill the role of the dispatcher, figuring out what the issue is, who else to engage, and how to reach the other people that they need to engage. They probably need some technology to help them with that. More ChatOps commands. I've seen lists of pager numbers or pager aliases that people have to go through by hand. I don't recommend that, but people made it work. Those people are probably going to be the same people who are trained as incident responders. I don't think I've ever seen a tech company have a difference between dispatcher and incident responder. That is a level of abstraction that places that I know haven't really reached yet. And maybe we don't need to reach it. Maybe because we're working mostly in a digital space, maybe that's not a divide that we need to have. But so those people that you reach, when you fire your emergency message out at your company, they should be able to be incident commanders when they get your call for help. Once you have an emergency, it can't be solved by one person. Emergency responders in the physical world are almost always sent out in pairs or larger groups, because when you have something that is both urgent and important, you need the resources of multiple people and multiple skill sets to turn it around. Incident response is a team sport. You need multiple people, they all need to play nicely together. Okay, in physical space, where to go is sometimes ambiguous. For instance, natural disasters won't necessarily have a single street address, but usually responders will congregate in person and use radios or occasionally cell phones, but usually radios because they don't depend on a physical network that may also be impacted to communicate with each other. You will likely need to decide on a digital site for your responders to join, and that site will be the same as your communications infrastructure. It'll be probably a conference call or Slack or Basecamp or whatever you're using. The specialists who join your incident response will also need to assemble at this site the same way that they would if they were going to a location in the physical world. And they should not leave it without designating a replacement for their role or being released by the incident commander. The incident commander says, yes, I agree with you that there is nothing else that you in your particular role can do to help in this situation. Thank you. You may go. Make sure that this site is likely to still work if your own infrastructure is down. And have a contingency plan if your site isn't working. My company uses Slack for its primary, but we also have a Google Hangout, like a permanent Google Hangout link as our backup. How to assess the situation. In our industry, you will probably be looking for impacted systems and customer experience. Identifying impacted systems means that you can get the right people to join your incident response. Identifying the customer experience means that you can tell customers what issues you are aware of so that they know that you're working on it, and so that they will still open support cases for other issues that are not related to the one that you're working on. This is an ongoing task for the incident commander. Assessing the situation is a continuous process. Depending on the issue, the answers to these questions could change. What's the customer impact? What are the systems that are not working over the course of your incident response based on either the environment, right? If in my company's case, if we're having an AWS incident, they change something and things start to work better or worse, or based on your own actions where you're trying to mitigate the problem. The essence of successful incident response is cooperation and delegation. No one can handle this solo. I'm really going to bang that drum. You can't do it by yourself. You got to do it as a team. It's dangerous to go alone. That means dividing up the work. Considerations for dividing it up include avoiding duplication of effort and considering whether you want to try things in parallel. Maybe you do want to try to problem solve. You have different people working on different angles of the issue. But you definitely don't want different people working on the issue from the same angle and stepping on each other. This also means, this delegation means that all of the people handling this work need to report back to the incident commander on a regular basis. When you take an action, the incident commander has to know that something was changed, that you did something to production. For the duration of the incident commander is the start of authority for your company. The incident commander is the only one with a view of the whole problem and all the people working on it. Even if everyone is in the same Slack channel, the incident commander's only job is to pay attention to this. That means that it is critical that no one argue with or countermand the incident commander, not other responders, not managers, not executives. Doing so means that everyone helping with the incident has to decide what side to take, right? The incident commander says one thing, some manager shows up and says something else. Suddenly, you're frozen because you don't know who to listen to. That slows everything down. It really impacts the responders' confidence in what we're doing. It makes the whole situation much more precarious. It also means that no one leaves until they are released by the incident commander or replaced, as I said before. So incident commander is the one who is responsible for the overall show, and everyone reports to them. Then you need some criteria for knowing when you're done. How do you decide that you're finished? Sometimes that's clear. There's no more impact, or we made a bad change, we rolled it back. But what if the end condition is we mitigated the problem, but we won't have the fix from the vendor for 3 weeks? What if it's we can't mitigate this problem, and we won't have the fix from the vendor for 3 weeks? It's just going to be broken for 3 weeks till the vendor gets the thing to us. What if it's a security incident, and now everyone in the company has to patch all their Redises, and it's going to take 3 weeks? That happens a lot. Start by coming up with a few high-level plans for cases like this when you're designing your system. When they happen, you can use those plans as a starting point. They're never going to be sufficient. You are never going to be able to come up with plans for dispersal for every situation. Like, how do we know we're done is always going to be a question that you iterate on in the moment. But if you have a plan to start with, then you can work from what you thought was a good idea when you were not overwhelmed and tired and had just been working on an incident for hours. Operational incidents can be very quick, but they can also last hours or days. Security incidents sometimes last weeks or months. You need an idea of what a shift is for your incident and what the process for a shift change should look like. I strongly recommend that shifts be no more than 4 hours. This is what we found empirically that people could handle as incident commander, and it is also what I learned when I took a class in the incident management system with retired emergency responders. They recommended 4 hours as well. Okay, for those of you who like to take pictures of slides, this is a good slide to take a picture of. This is the summary. This is your minimum viable incident response plan. There's a lot more to it than this, but this is how to get started. If you cover this stuff, you have a good foundation, and you can move forward from here. I'll leave the slide up for a moment. Nope, thank you, but. And then you need to train people. At the barest minimum, you need training and documentation for your incident commanders. You'll get much better results if all of your engineers are trained as if they were going to be the incident commanders themselves, because that will tell them what the incident commander needs, and more importantly, why. It reduces crankiness, it speeds up their answers. Sometimes engineers that we have trained as incident commanders will just spit out all the things that they know the incident commander needs without even the incident commander having to ask, which is just the dream. It means that we all know what direction we're going in, we all know that we're going in it together, and it means that when I, as the incident commander, say, what's the customer impact, I don't get back, well, I'm trying to fix it, why are you asking me questions that don't matter? Okay, that was the crash course. There are lots of places to go from here. Those were the very beginning steps. There's a bunch of other things that you could try to do once you have some of that down. You could think about, how do you communicate with your customers while all of this is happening? This is part of why you ask for the customer impact as an incident commander. So you can tell them what's going on. You could think about, how do you engage lawyers? How do you engage PR people? Sometimes you really do need PR people for an incident, especially like a billing incident where you've been maybe telling people that you were going to charge them more money than you should have been telling them that you were going to charge them. How do you engage the executives if you have a really bad decision? Like, we could turn it all off for half an hour, all of it, and then it would be fixed. Or we could not turn it all off for half an hour and it will take 6 more hours to fix it. How do you engage your vendors? Oh my God, the Cisco concentrator did some terrible thing and now we don't have anything and we can't talk to anybody. How do your vendors engage you? How does AWS tell us that we need to cut it out because we're impacting their API? That's happened. Profit? Yeah, kind of profit. Like, my company has actually very good customer satisfaction ratings during incidents because we're very good at telling people that we're definitely working on it, and we're very clear about what the problem is that we're working on. It gives customers a lot of confidence that we know what we're doing, that we have their backs, and that we are going to fix it for them, and they can go get a cup of coffee and take a nice little walk. So, for those of you who've been wondering from the beginning what actually happened with that story, the account in question was a brand new dev account that had its creds checked into GitHub by accident, first thing after account creation. So it was a big no-op, right? But several other people, including, I don't know how this happened, including our CFO, noticed this message and came to me over the course of the day in my role as both Senior Incident Commander and AWS Liaison and was like, what happened? Did we get popped? What are we doing? Oh my God. So there was still a little bit of incident response to do. And it was kind of fun because there wasn't actually anything really wrong, but we sort of got to talk about what would have happened if there had been. And that's the kind of nerd that I am. So further resources. You can look at the Wikipedia page for the incident command system. That's the one that the US uses. There is a book called Incident Management for Operations, and that is written by the 3 retired firefighters and hazmat people who gave me training in the incident command system. There is a page from Public Safety Canada about Canada's management system that you can read, which is actually fairly, I like the way the Government of Canada does their comms. They're very clear and sort of like low jargon. Things that I want to read that I have not read yet: A Paradise Built in Hell, which is a book about what happens after natural disasters strike. How do people actually respond to that? Do they, become Lord of the Flies, or do they band together and help each other? Spoiler, it's the second. The Survivors Club, and that is about people who live through plane crashes. Like, what is the difference between the people who made it out of the aircraft or made it out of the ocean and the people who did not? I'd like to acknowledge Marlena Compton, who read over a draft of this presentation with me and provided a lot of encouragement and really kept me focused. Also, Mental Health First Aid Canada, helping me take care of other people better and for showing me what it feels like when you don't know how to respond to a situation. That's where I had the understanding that if you freeze when something unexpected and serious happens to you, it means that you don't have any training in handling that situation. There's also mental health first aid education here and in Australia, and I think a few other places too. If you're interested in talking about that, come and find me. Thank you very much.
Well, that went fast. I think I'm going to lead us off with a question.
Yeah.
So instead of freezing, I have heard that it can be useful to have some scripts that you've practiced. Do you have any good pointers on where to find those kind of scripts if somebody comes up to you with either an incident at work that you need to work on or a mental health thing that you would like to react appropriately to?
Yeah, okay. So for the mental health thing, I would say that there are a few things you can do. You can volunteer for a crisis hotline, and they will give you training in how to respond to people who are having mental health problems. You could also look for and take a mental health first aid training, which is a little bit more intense than crisis hotline training. I've done both. For things at work, that's where you really need to know what is your sort of 911 response at your job. How do you engage other people to help you with this? And in my case, I am on an entire team of incident commanders. I'm very close to the infrastructure that we have for engaging an incident commander and having an incident and deciding whether we don't have an incident. You may not be that close, but if you are not, the thing to do is to figure out how to engage those people most quickly. Hopefully there is some sort of like one button, cut a ticket, I need help, or one Slack command, chat ops thing, I need help. If there isn't, then that's the time to start figuring out how to implement that at your company and who should be on the other end of it when there is a call for help. Does that answer your question? Cool.
If we have any other questions, please step up to the microphone.
Sorry, that felt like a really long walk. Yeah, so my question is also, how do you communicate to your vendors and such that, I don't know, say the power company shuts off the power to several million people that happen to include your primary people responsible for that particular widget?
How do you communicate to the vendor for what purpose? Like turn it back on?
Well, just that if you have a tier 1, like 0 downtime SLA,
Yep.
oh, and that depends on these particular people being available, and you had 9 people, but they all happen to be taken out.
Right. So how do you tell the vendor that they goofed and they kind of owe you under contract?
Contract, I mean, it's also like if it truly is life safety,
Yeah.
then people are potentially literally dying because somebody made an assumption that wasn't valid.
Right. That's a long-term relationship with the vendor problem, I think. Like in the moment, maybe you have some sort of emergency protocol that you can engage with them. That's often for, people who depend on like a lot of Cisco routers. They usually have some high escalation that they can do. For my company, we can page people at AWS. But it's probably a long conversation. Like I said, I'm the AWS relationship manager, and so one of the things that I've had to do is have these conversations about, okay, you said this wasn't a problem, but it's definitely a problem for us, and it's been a problem for us for a long time. What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? Make sense?
Yeah.
Does that answer what you were asking?
Well, yeah, it was also just kind of a, as part of my day job, I'm communications unit leader for emergency management, and one of the ones I always do a shout out is when in doubt, slow down. Is the suggestion I would
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, everybody please join me in giving another round of applause, and thanks to Courtney.